A young physician adjusted the dressing for a wealthy woman in a coma. Astonishingly, she awoke, and the morning shift at St. Luke's Hospital started like any other for Dr. Ethan Carter. Yet something about the gentle September glow streaming through the clinic's windows caused him to linger in his duties. At 31, Ethan had served in the neurological critical care unit for 6 years, devoting his life to patients who often couldn't voice their needs, depending entirely on the empathy and expertise of their healthcare team. Ethan's dark hair was perpetually slightly messy, despite his attempts to keep it neat, and his warm smile had become a beacon of solace for families enduring their most trying moments. He viewed medicine not merely as a discipline, but as a vocation, believing that recovery stemmed as much from human bonds as from clinical treatment. Room 314 had been home for 3 months to a patient who had drawn the curiosity of everyone at the hospital, though not for the usual reasons. Isabella Thornton, a 28-year-old entrepreneur, had been unconscious since a car crash that grabbed headlines not for the incident itself, but for her identity. The Thornton family's wealth, amassed through decades of shrewd investments, had made Isabella one of the youngest female billionaires in the nation, but riches held no power against a severe brain injury. Isabella lay motionless and quiet, her golden hair fanned across the pillow like woven sunlight, breathing with the aid of machines while her loved ones kept a steadfast watch. Other doctors handled her with professional skill, but Ethan had noticed something troubling. She was turning into more of a medical enigma than a person to many staff members. Ethan made it a habit to speak to all his coma patients, convinced that somewhere in their silence they might still hear. With Isabella, he went beyond. Each morning, as he replaced her bandages, he shared thoughts about the weather, books he was enjoying, or the fleeting moments of beauty he'd seen on his way to work. "Good morning, Isabella," Ethan said softly as he entered her room, holding fresh dressings and speaking in the kind tone he'd use with any awake patient. "The trees are just beginning to change outside your window. I think fall might be your favorite season. There's something about how the light touches your face that hints you cherish lovely shifts." The nurses, Emma and Rachel, observed from the doorway with a professional curiosity born of watching doctors adopt varied approaches to care. They'd both noticed Ethan lingered with Isabella longer than required, his touch especially tender when adjusting her position or checking her reflexes. As Ethan carefully peeled the dressing from Isabella's arm, where the IV had caused slight irritation, he continued his one-sided dialogue. "I read about a study yesterday suggesting coma patients might hear and understand more than we think. I hope you feel the care surrounding you, the commitment to guiding you back." What Ethan didn't know was that Isabella had been aware for weeks, trapped in a body that refused to obey her urgent attempts to signal. She had absorbed every word he spoke, felt the difference in his gentle touch compared to others, and had come to yearn for his morning visits as the sole light in her terrifying darkness. Isabella had been battling to awaken, but her body seemed detached from her resolve. Until today, as Ethan's careful hands cleaned and rebandaged her arm, speaking to her with the same dignity he'd offer any patient, something shifted. The blend of his compassion and her determination finally pierced the barrier, holding her in unconsciousness. "Ethan," Isabella whispered, her voice faint but undeniably present. Ethan paused, hands still on the fresh dressing, his gaze snapping to Isabella's face. Her eyes were open, blinking slowly as she adjusted to the bright room. "After months of darkness, Isabella." Ethan's voice held a mix of professional thrill and personal relief that caught him off guard. "Can you hear me? Can you see me?" "I can hear you," Isabella managed, her voice growing steadier. "I've been hearing you every morning. You spoke about the trees changing." Ethan felt tears well in his eyes as he pressed the call button to alert the staff, never breaking eye contact with Isabella's face. "How long have you been aware?" "Weeks," Isabella replied, attempting to shift slightly. "But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. You were the only one who treated me like I was still human." The room soon buzzed with medical staff, all astonished at Isabella's awakening, conducting tests and monitoring her responses. But through it all, Isabella's gaze kept returning to Ethan, the man whose voice had anchored her through her darkest time. Dr. Margaret Collins, the head of neurology, performed a detailed assessment that confirmed what seemed miraculous. Isabella had sustained no major cognitive impairment and was making a remarkably full recovery. "This is remarkable," Dr. Collins told Ethan privately. "In my 25 years, I've rarely seen someone emerge from such a prolonged coma with such clarity." Over the following days, as Isabella regained strength and prepared for discharge, she and Ethan forged a friendship that surprised them both with its ease and depth. Isabella learned that Ethan had chosen medicine after losing his younger sister in an accident, dedicating his life to sparing families the helplessness he'd felt during her final days. Ethan found that Isabella was far from the distant executive he'd imagined. She was reflective and inquisitive, asking about his life and passions with sincere interest, sharing her own aspirations to use her wealth for meaningful impact. "You know," Isabella said one afternoon as Ethan finished his shift, "I've spent most of my adult life surrounded by people who saw me as a tool for their goals, business partners seeking connections, suitors chasing my wealth, even friends who valued what I could offer more than who I was." "That must have been profoundly isolating," Ethan said, settling into the chair by her bed. "It was. But lying here, hearing you speak to me daily, I realized you saw me as a person worth valuing, even when I could offer nothing in return. You shared stories of books, weather, and small, beautiful moments, not because you wanted anything, but because you believed I deserved respect." Ethan felt warmth in his cheeks. That's how I believe people should be treated." "That's my point," Isabella said softly. "You did it effortlessly because it's who you are. Do you know how rare that is?" When Isabella was discharged 2 weeks later, she asked Ethan if he'd join her for dinner. Not as doctor and patient, but as two people who'd shared something profound and wanted to explore its potential. "I need you to know," Isabella said, as they sat in a quiet restaurant, far from the world of corporate dinners and social pressures she knew, "that if you agree to get to know me better, you're signing up for a complex life. There'll be media scrutiny, societal expectations, people questioning your intentions." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand with the same gentle touch that had helped rouse her from her coma. "Isabella, for 3 months, I spoke to someone I thought might never answer, might never know someone cared for her. If you're willing to take a chance on a doctor who drives a decade-old car and finds joy in reading medical journals and cooking at home, I'm ready to face whatever challenges come with loving you." Their bond grew with the same tender patience Ethan had shown during Isabella's recovery. They found shared values in service and impact, took joy in simple moments like park strolls and museum visits, and built a foundation of respect and genuine care that transcended Isabella's wealth or Ethan's professional role. A year later, when Ethan proposed to Isabella in the hospital room where she'd first opened her eyes to his face, he said, "I fell in love with you when you were unconscious, which sounds absurd until I explain that I fell for the person I sensed you were, based on your strength and resilience. Getting to know the real you has been even greater than I imagined." Isabella accepted, tears in her eyes, saying, "You loved me when I couldn't love myself, when I couldn't speak for myself. You saw value in me at my most vulnerable. That's the kind of love that endures forever." Their wedding took place in the hospital chapel, attended by many staff who'd cared for Isabella during her recovery. Dr. Collins, an ordained minister, officiated, speaking of love rooted in service and nurtured through devotion, of partnerships honoring both strength and fragility. The Thornton Foundation, established by Isabella post-recovery, became a leading medical charity, funding research into brain injuries and supporting families through long-term medical crises. Ethan continued his hospital work, though Isabella's support enabled him to pursue research to help other patients recover from similar challenges. "You know," Isabella often said when asked about their love story, "most think Ethan saved my life by being there when I awoke. But the truth is, he saved me long before by treating me with kindness and dignity when I couldn't speak for myself. He reminded me I was worth caring for, and that gave me the strength to fight my way back." And Ethan, watching his wife support families facing crises like hers, would add quietly, "Love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's about showing up consistently, treating people with care when they're most vulnerable, and believing in their worth even when they can't see it themselves."